But one of the great things about introducing Jon is one of the more unique people I think we'd all agree in the business. Now, I can get to say this because, unlike Ketchum, Jon's not my client. So I can actually praise without having a pecuniary interest, though I do have a future hope, Flaherty, just so you know. But Jon is sort of unique in our business. And you know, there's only been 2 or 3 people who have somewhat come close to what Jon has accomplished. And let me look at his bio for a second, because it's such an interesting one. Jon is head of Marketing, Communications, and Citizenship Organization for IBM. He runs their global team. Now, a lot of people have titles like that. But here's the next paragraph that few people in our industry have ever had. Jon reports to the CEO. He is chairman of the IBM strategy team, which focuses on the company's long-term strategic issues and opportunities, and is a member of IBM's operating committee, which is responsible for its marketplace execution. I think that really sums up the differential and what Jon has accomplished in his life. Jon is a true member of one of the largest organizations in the world. He's a true leader of that organization, and he brings all the skills of how one should communicate. More importantly than just being seen as a communicator, he's seen as a business leader for that company. And with that, we've asked Jon today to basically talk about how he thinks public relations and communications should be transforming itself in future and what the rules of the road are that we should be following. So please welcome a real, I'd say, I don't know what I'd call you, Iwata, but definitely a leader in our industry.
Thanks, Harry. Thank you. Good morning. Thank you. Very kind. Thank you, Harrison. And I look forward to our dialogue in a minute. I'm happy to talk to you during the dialogue portion about IBM, if you're interested in anything specific at my company or in my organization. But what I thought I'd start with is share with you some work that I'm familiar with and have contributed to in my capacity as a peer. So we hang out in different places like the PR Summit here. Some of us belong to different associations. One is the Arthur Page Society, mostly US members. We're trying to globalize as well. But it's a group of chief communications officers, and the society exists to advance the practice and the work that we're all involved with as chief communications officers. And a few years ago, we began to look at all the changes that you have been talking about here at this summit and will back at home at your companies and agencies. And the world is changing, but what is it becoming in terms of the practice of our work? And we looked at dozens and dozens of companies. We talked to lots of peers. What do you see? What are you doing? And out of that came a view. It's not finished by any means, but it's a view of how the model of communications, public relations, how it's evolving, and that's what I'd like to spend a few minutes sharing with you here. And let me start off by saying that models do matter. So whether you went to school to study marketing or public relations, or whether you've been practicing it without a license for years, we'd assert that we all operate on the basis of mental models. And our teams do that. So whether we're drawing up a product launch plan, or managing a crisis, or doing M&A, or announcing a new CEO, models come into play. And they're very, very powerful. Here are a few. They're not, this is not an exhaustive list. For those who are familiar with Edward L. Bernays, he's often credited as being the father of public relations. He wrote this piece in 1928 called Propaganda. It's before it became a pejorative. The key insight in Bernays' work here, I think I'll get the quote more or less right. Bernays said back in 1928 that it is only through the intelligent few that the public at large becomes aware of an idea and acts upon it. Now, hearing that in 2012 might send a little chill up your spine. Here's somebody who says it's only through the intelligent few that the public becomes aware of an idea and acts upon it. Perhaps, but in that observation is a new model, at the time a new model. Today we call it influencing the influencers. So whether we like the terminology or not, we have practiced for years the belief that if you get to the few, they could be reporters, they could be analysts, they could be bloggers today, they could be celebrities, then the few influence the many. That's a model that's very powerful. Here's another one for those who more familiar with marketing theory, the funnel. And the funnel's been in existence since the 19th century, 1898, I believe. You can go to Google and Google marketing funnel and hit image, and you'll get scores and scores of diagrams like the original one here, which you see. Some of them have 8 stages, some of them are a little fatter or thinner than others. But it's telling that they're always drawn as funnels. It suggests a view of the world and how the world works, that we get to a large population of people, we raise their awareness. Somewhere in that large population, there are individuals who are interested in our thing. We cultivate that interest and desire, and then we hopefully cause them to act, usually buy. But it could be support a policy, it could be, vote for a candidate, it could be buy your stock. But the very fact that it's drawn as a funnel suggests a view of how we think the world works. That it's about raising awareness at population scale, and then, of course, finding the few within the population who are actually interested in what we have to offer. The last one here I share with you is a impossible-to-view memo written in the 1930s by Pritchard's company, Procter & Gamble, written by Neil McElroy. McElroy wrote a memo inside of Procter & Gamble back in the 30s where he proposes the creation of something entirely new. He was promoting soap. And what he was finding in his work, that people were buying not only his soap, the one that he was promoting, they were buying other soaps, including soaps from his same company, Procter & Gamble. What he observed is that from the standpoint of the consumer, they perceive no differences between one soap or another, even from Procter & Gamble. They all sort of smell the same, they all sort of cost the same. So what he proposes in this memo is the creation of something new, which is, it is possible to segment a population based on unique needs and desires or other kinds of criteria. You then can line up specific brands that represent or serve the unique needs of each segment. And in fact, you can create so many different segmentation models that the same company can create many products serving different needs. Well, that's so fundamental, it's amazing that it's only been in existence since the 1930s. So today, when we go to launch a product or to elect a president, do we not segment the market? Do we not line up key messages, value propositions, brands, offers by segment? Thinking, as McElroy proposed, you could be so successful at this, even the corporation presenting the same versions, multiple versions of the same product, can be virtually invisible. The brand of the product will be more important than the entity behind it. No doubt there are other models that are powerful, and there's nothing wrong with these models today, but we would argue that these are inadequate for the world in which we now live. Why? Well, you've been seeing versions of this chart all summit long. It's no need to dwell on how the world is changing because of all these different forces. And I'll also add, because I'm the IBM guy here, the importance of data. Just take a look at this chart. You don't have to memorize the elements inside of the so-called phenomenon of big data. Just look at the trajectory. The data is being created by all of us as we tweet and blog. It's being created through medical images captured in digital form. It's being produced by cameras at every street intersection. It's being produced by RFID tags being attached to every product. It's created by sensors in the streets and the power grid. We are awash with data, and most of it is unstructured, meaning it isn't so easy for a computer to process. That's neither here nor there about how the technology works. The question is our profession, whether it's public relations or marketing, whether we are taking full advantage of the data that is going to be generated and frankly is already being generated about markets, about customers, about issues. Social sentiment monitoring is a baby step toward this world. And part of the new model that we want to describe now is based on these new realities. And these are just some comments that we collected over the past couple of years as we did the work here. Again, I'm not going to belabor them. Just glancing at this probably reflects your own understanding and your own feelings about the world in which we now live. So, what is the so-called new model? Very, very quickly, it has two elements. The thing in the middle describes us, describes our companies. You've been having great discussions about reputation. Some really subscribe to reputation management, others to brand stewardship, and there's probably a lot of other variations. Here's another one for you to think about. Corporate character, the character of our companies. Spend a minute on that. And then the outer ring is how we engage with decision makers, and I use that term specifically. I don't use the term audiences or segments because I think the world we're moving into, from what we learned through our work here, is that we are eventually going to get down to communicating to individuals at scale rather than to segments and demographics en masse. That is a huge and fundamental shift in how we think about our work. Corporate character, love this quote from Lincoln. You heard one from Aristotle last night. Well, here's one from Lincoln. Love this one. It speaks truth about individuals. It speaks truth about corporations as well. Unfortunately, one can say that too many in the PR and marketing fields have spent more time on the shadow and not enough on the health of the tree, starting with what kind of tree are we? A lot of this becomes revealed when you think about, this is a very simple way of thinking about brands. You could also say reputation management if you'd like. House of brands, well, there's Neil McElroy's company, Procter & Gamble, there's Unilever. There are many companies that have multiple brands. The parent, the corporate brand, the master brand takes a back seat to the product brand, to the offering brand. Branded house says products come and go. We're going to build equity into the entity itself, my own company being an example of that. Nobody actually knows how many products and services IBM offers. We say 20,000, we don't know. We don't want you, frankly, to know or to remember. We want to build equity in the corporate brand. That's a choice. However, even in the so-called house of brands, because of the effect of transparency, when people now know that it's Procter & Gamble behind soap A, B, and C, they now know that we are behind our actions in treatment of our employees and the supply chain and the impact on the environment and how we pay our executives. This is all now known because of the transparency effect. These companies, so-called house of brands, are asking, in some cases for the first time in their histories, what do we stand for since the world now sees us? Unilever. These aren't ad slogans. These are statements of, we would say, character. What do we stand for? What do we believe? Starbucks, going through a bit of a turnaround in the recent years. What do we stand for? What do we believe? What is our mission and purpose? BMW, one word you don't see in their description here, cars or automobiles. They don't feel that their character is limited by what they currently sell, or sell a lot of, which is automobile. In the case of IBM, our discussions about the character of our company led to something that perhaps some of you would recognize as Smarter Planet, our business platform. What is character? Some of these are very fundamental. It's a sense of what makes us, us. It is not ethics alone. It is not doing the right thing. It is what makes Apple, Apple. What makes Starbucks, Starbucks. What makes BMW, BMW. It's a sense of uniqueness, differentiation, distinctiveness, beliefs, values, purpose. And then it's the hard work of activating that throughout the company. Much more to be said about it, but that's the notion. Let me move quickly to the second piece of it, which is how then do we engage with the world? If we're not going to use funnels to broadcast messages to populations, we're not going to segment people off so that they're not aware of messages from one audience to another, which is virtually impossible today, then how do we do it? We believe it's not about raising awareness in a world or a time where we are saturated with awareness. Awareness raising is not easy, but it's not that hard today. What is hard is what causes people to believe. This is not about trust me or trust my company. It's what do I believe about any given topic? Belief is much more difficult. than simply making people aware of a message. But it unlocks the whole cycle here of behavior. You've been talking about the role of science at this summit. You heard from a neuroscientist yesterday. A lot of people were talking about what a wonderful talk that was. In our work, we looked at the sciences, particularly behavioral science and behavioral economics, because so much is now known today about why humans behave certain ways. And I just want to, how does it relate to this? If we're eventually going to go from communicating to, engaging with, marketing to individuals rather than segments, then you have to know how to do that, and you also have to know how a human being behaves. Not becomes aware of something, not knows something or understands, but what causes them to actually do something. And we don't have to make that up, we just have to borrow or use and leverage what is already known about that. So you take someone, what causes someone to believe? Now, we're all professional communicators here. If the question is, what causes someone to be aware of something, we know how to do that. If the question is, what causes somebody to know something, you know how to do that. Even if the question is, what causes you to understand something, you and our teams know how to do that. But if the question is, what causes you to believe something, that's different. And again, the big drivers, and we looked at the literature here. There are many drivers of belief, to be sure, but here are three of the most important ones. I hear it from people I trust, I see evidence and facts, and I have a personal experience with it. You think about traditional PR and traditional communications, events, launches, broadcast, videos, speeches, press, noise, buzz. How much of that really relates to these three drivers of belief? You could use an ad to do this. You could use an event to do this. You could use a speech to do this. But so often we don't. Because the goal has not been this, the goal has been raising awareness. Even when we believe something, we don't. Let me ask you this, by a show of hands, how many of us believe that regular exercise is good for your health? How many of you believe that regular exercise is good for your health? How many of you exercise regularly? Put your hands down quick. Yeah.
How many were just really truthful?
Yeah. That's why I said it real quick, so you didn't have a chance to think it. Why isn't it 100%? You see, the question wasn't, are you aware that a study says, no, you believe, and I have no doubt this is true, right? Exercise is good. You believe this. And there are many things we believe, but do we do? No. What causes somebody to act upon a belief? Well, and by the way, this is all available in a paper we wrote. It's available if you Google building belief at the Page Society. You'll get all of the details here. The person lacks what the behavioral scientists would call agency. You can build agency up. You can help somebody to act upon a belief by driving these three things. There are many. Here are three that we think are practicable. Again, you have to ask yourself, go back to your teams as they plan their big product launch or as they handle their crises, and you're saying, well, we want eventually to not just create buzz and get lots of likes on social. Eventually, we want somebody to do something, buy our product, work for our company, support our position. Have you shaped their belief? Well, maybe we ascertain that we have. Are they acting on the belief? Could you teach them how? Could you show them role models, people like them? And could you equip them with knowledge or skills or tools? That's very, very different than yet more messaging out into the world. And then off we go. There are many things we start to do we don't sustain. How many of us join health clubs but we don't go back? How many bought health equipment and they're sitting in our basements, not being used much? There are things people start to do but don't sustain, and we can help with that. And finally, this is a lot of the discussion about social media. We want that word-of-mouth advocacy because it's so powerful. How do we unlock it? Well, we would say we have to earn it. And we can do something to ensure that advocacy exists at scale. So very quickly, the implications of this kind of work, corporate character on the one hand, and a different kind of engagement model that drives behavior, not awareness, has implications, we believe, for our profession and for our functions. Here are a few. I'll just comment on a couple here. Chief Collaboration Officers in quotation marks. Nobody's actually asking for a title change. This would be kind of a weird title anyway. But the idea that we and our organizations have to be very, very good at collaborating across the C-suite in our companies to take that sense of character and to activate it in operations, that's a different skill. To be a publisher and developer is to be a creator of original content. And I hope we talk about this, Harris. I mean, this phenomenon that more and more companies are becoming media companies directly and becoming software companies directly. Creating content, creating apps, putting them into the world, not relying, as we have forever, on intermediaries, not only to get our story told, but to develop a relationship with a decision maker. Yes, I do believe that we all have to figure out what to make of this phenomenon that some call big data, not just for measurement, and curators of corporate character. I, for one, feel that's part of my job. The IBM brand is valuable. I don't consider myself the brand steward. I consider myself one of many who tend to the character of IBM. Let me close by sharing with you, just to make it more concrete, some examples, I won't, half a sentence each here, of companies that are stepping into the domain of original content, becoming publishers and software developers. I saw this at one of our own conferences a few months ago, very, very powerful. Home Depot, not the marketing department, the communications function, creating how-to videos on YouTube, very low cost, and putting them out there. Why? How to tile a bathroom, how to fix a faucet. Why? Because as people Google, how do I do that, they're finding dozens and dozens of these very brief, pretty well done how-to videos produced directly by Home Depot out there. And obviously, if you're going to learn how to tile a bathroom step by step, does it up your chances you'll turn to Home Depot to buy what you need to buy? That's what they're thinking of. Interesting strategic use of original content. Different example, AT&T. For the CSR, the community outreach part of it. This is the, don't text while driving. A tremendous, tremendous effect of these videos about the effects of people who are distracted while driving and, lives lost and so forth. Chevron's fighting a very, very difficult piece of litigation having to do with a country, I think it's Ecuador here, and trying to get their side of this very bitter, multi-billion-dollar case told. In the past, they would have to rely on the press and others. Now they're doing that, and they're going directly. They created this site, the Amazon Post. Unbelievable with the content here that's available. The press uses it, and so does everybody else, directly from Chevron. So that's a very quick summary of the so-called new model, but wanted to share that with you, and now let's get to the dialogue. Thank you.
Good. So maybe picking up on that, John, and going sort of to the 60,000 square foot, level. A couple of weeks ago, or actually I think it was last week, 80 CEOs published a manifesto in the Wall Street Journal whereby they called that after the election, they suggested that it was time for a compromise and that we needed to both raise revenue in the United States and also potentially increase taxes, but no matter what we did, we have to solve the problems of the deficit. Now, those 80 corporations stretch from some of the biggest financial names in the business to some of the most important industrial concerns. In your role as both chairman of the Arthur Page Society, in your role as one of the leaders of the architect of transparency in the public relations industry, and in your role as a leader at IBM, do you think the future is corporations getting more and more involved in the political process? And would you say that that is something you'd recommend as they try to build an image of good citizenship in the United States and abroad?
Yeah, I think the answer is corporations have always operated out of self-interest. Some have been more enlightened than others, perhaps. But in this specific case, it illustrates the fact that corporations, even in their self-interest, need to have a business environment that promotes their goals. And apparently these CEOs felt, and I can understand why, that if the United States is to be competitive in attracting and retaining a level of economic investment by leading corporations, some things have to change. I don't think it's limited to the United States for those who are here from multinationals or global firms. You go make a call in any country, get off an airplane anywhere in the world, and there's, one of the things you'll hear from a government official is, we want more jobs, more FDI, more this, more that, more taxes. Our response is, in this world, in this flat world, what will cause this company, that company, any company to invest, to create jobs, to build factories? Why? And I think in a way what those CEOs were saying to this country was some things have to change if you want to create the business environment for that to happen, because businesses like people have choices today. And work is going to flow and investment is going to flow many, many parts of the world. What will cause it to flow, in this case, to the United States? I don't think you can be a global business without participating in that dialogue and to having some sort of influence on it.
So you see corporations once again raising their hands and being involved. David Gregory, when he met with the PR industry in Washington, D.C., for those of you outside the United States, he runs one of the most important political discussion shows in our country. Basically said the problem he sees is that corporations are ducking and covering, and that corporations are not willing to engage, and that corporations would rather put out bland statements by bland people that say bland things. Your view of where we're going in this area?
Well, I don't know whether we're going to put out provocative statements to the press or whether we want to get to the people who actually are in a position to do something other than to talk about it. I'm not anti-intermediary, even in my description here. I think what's exciting about the possibilities today is the possibility to have direct influence with the people who make a difference, whether it's the consumer buying, the university student choosing who they're going to work for, or in this case, people who make decisions about fiscal and monetary policy. And I don't think that has to play out in the press anymore. The question is whether a company is willing to take a position and then try to affect change. And I think many companies do that.
Okay. Question from the audience. Laura.
Well, I want to ask you about something that is...
I think we have a mic coming to you. And I saw another question back there. Maybe we can get a mic towards the back as we do this.
Hi, John. I want to ask you a question that's related, personally, I feel very close to it because, as you can hear in my accent, immigration is something that I pay a lot of attention to. 30 years ago, I was allowed to come to a graduate school here and subsequently get a job and build a career. And I can see that your family probably came from someplace else, and that's why you're here. So, on top of that, I know that in the technology arena, getting working visas for people from other parts of the world is a major issue that is an obstacle to the business. So how does IBM deal with that, and how do you guys manage, policy issues like immigration and working visas, and can you give us a little bit of a background on that?
Yeah, I'll answer it specifically about IBM. I mean, we do believe that one of the great strengths historically of investing in the United States is the superior, the advantages of the higher education system here, the skill base that then is created that we can tap into. And it's worked very, very well not only for the company, not only for the country, but for this industry, the IT industry, and for IBM. It's understandable why that changed, probably in reaction to 9/11. But we believe that historic strength now can be recaptured if there is, thoughtful consideration of immigration and visas and all the things you just mentioned. And we are advocating for that and have for quite a while. I do think it comes back to this issue of competitive advantage and distinctive advantage. And can you force companies to create manufacturing jobs here or in any country, or force companies to do anything through protectionist efforts and all the rest? History has shown that has very limited success. One historic success of the United States has been, among others, immigration. There aren't too many countries in the world that welcome immigration. You know, they welcome tourism, but they really don't want people to come and stay and become citizens. Not many countries have that genuinely. Historically, this country has. That's how my family got here and so forth and so on. And how we navigate those waters, you know, through social issues, security issues, will be very, very important. But it has been a very important differentiator for this country. It's not one that's easily cast aside.
Jon, when you look at social media today and you talk about the necessity to be authentic, with everybody in every company being a potential publisher, as one of your slides pointed out, how do you maintain control, and is it possible to maintain control of a brand, of what a brand means? Your factory workers speak as often as sometimes as you do. How do you see this playing out in the future?
Well, you know, you can't control, and you can't even attempt to control what your employees or customers or others say about you. In our case, we have more than 300,000 employees who are on LinkedIn, for example. LinkedIn tells us it's the largest professional population they have. They did an analysis. The 300,000 IBMers have first-order contacts of 60 million people. Nobody asked them to go to LinkedIn. And we cannot possibly hope to influence directly what they share and talk about with 60 million people. But what can we do? Well, we can try to be a great company where they feel, you know, pride. We cannot do dumb things that they then feel compelled to have to defend or explain. We can then equip them with things that they may not be aware of, that we want them to be aware of. We can design things to be shared and not just consumed. On that last one, you know, as simple as it is to say we are expert at designing communications to be consumed, the press release, the video, the speech, we also now need to be expert at designing communications to be shared. And as simple as that little change is in phrase, it's been really, really hard for my team to master how to create media that people want to share. It's not hard to put the buttons and all that stuff there or truncate stuff. This gets back to humans, right?
Yes.
What causes somebody to want to share, endorse, you know, and say, I want you to read this or do something as a result of it? That's something that we're still trying to unlock, as are, you know, many other teams.
I mean, some would just question whether or not you can come up with the big idea. The idea that people find worthwhile to actually send to somebody else as an example of something they believe in or something they like or something that's potentially they don't like. Are you finding that the control with respect to that issue in an organization the size of yours is problematic? How do you see that developing?
We had those discussions years ago, and you know, I don't think this is dissimilar from any company represented in this room here. You know, the CFO is concerned about disclosure. Mm-hmm. The general counsel is concerned about intellectual property leakage. The head of HR likes social because they can recruit via it, but they also fear social because of criticism of management and so forth. And the CIO, from the standpoint of this is not actually free, there's bandwidth, and there's also vulnerabilities introduced to security. As a cross C-suite group, we grappled with these questions a couple of years ago, and we continue to meet to work through them. In our case, we landed on the following posture. We have to embrace it, and we have to begin to use it strategically to IBM's interests. In other words, we want all of our employees to embrace social media, and we want them to be good at it. We think it's just an extension of discourse and how fields are where people participate in professional fields, whether they're computer science related or marketing and public relations. Mm-hmm. Therefore, it's in our interest for you, it's in your interest, the IBMer, to be there. It's in both of our interests for you to be there responsibly and to be very effective at it. We had to get past that control thing, and I think we have.
Okay. Yes, sir.
A couple questions about Smarter Planet. Could you talk
Yes.
about the percentage of your 20,000 odd products that are under that mantle in terms, or drive that directly? Do you have targets And then could you talk about any lessons learned that other companies might apply from your reframing of your technology company around social impact in a very broad and public way?
Thank you. I think the first lesson we've learned from Smarter Planet has been, up until in 2004, IBM sold its PC business to Lenovo. When we did that in 2004, we got out of our last consumer-facing business. We became exclusively a B2B brand, as we had been for most of our 100-year history. Many of us expected the IBM brand, would start to drift down in terms of value and so forth. In fact, if you look at third-party measures, the IBM brand has increased in value every year since then. Lesson one is brand visibility and brand recognition, good. Brand relevance, better. And the problem for IBM, and I would say for some other brands, is not making the brand recognizable or visible. It's making the brand relevant to the things people care about. Smarter Planet helps us, we believe, to show the things that we do at IBM that impacts in a positive way the things that people care about. That's number one, brand relevance. Number two, we see the difference between serving an existing market, which we all have to do every day, go get our share of it, to making markets. And so something that's entered our vocabulary is when we're in making market mode versus capturing market mode. And you can almost take the marketing and public relations team and divide them into almost two different sports or two different kinds of athletes. Those who are really good at going into an existing market space and saying, why IBM versus Oracle or Accenture or one of our competitors? Hard work, important work. There is a different task when you're making a market. No vocabulary exists to describe fighting crime with data or smart grid. In the very first communications back in 2008, when we launched Smarter Planet, we had quotation marks around all kinds of terms, including smart grid. The quotation marks have dropped away. Why? Because we couldn't describe something with the available vocabulary and terminology. It's just an example of the difference between chasing share within an existing space and making markets. And that's another way of a lesson that we've learned from Smarter Planet. Of the 20,000 or whatever products and services, we think the majority of them have benefited from a demand standpoint from this business platform.
Well, you've created a market, in essence, by doing that. If we take a look at what's happened recently with the Tea Party in the United States, the Occupy movement around the world, the Arab Spring, there's an argument now that movements are leaderless, and in essence, that the world is headed towards a leaderless chain of communication, and that they will be spontaneously growing. How does that work with the corporate environment? How do you think that plays out with those of us in the public relations and communications field?
Yeah, it's hard to know yet what the phenomenon that you describe, and by the way, they also take place with consumers, right, and inside of workforces too, and how something just gets started, takes hold, and begins to cause some level of activity, hopefully positive. I think how do we identify those when they begin to happen, whether they're positive or something we should be more concerned about, and how do we understand them to our advantage? I think it's a very powerful thing. It's very, very new. I can't separate it from social media. I mean, Malcolm Gladwell, you and I were talking earlier about Malcolm Gladwell. He said that in his view, the Arab Spring, the people didn't take to the streets until after the government shut the internet off, because up until then they were all sort of sharing things, using devices. But after that was cut off, they then had to get out in the streets to do this, which is interesting. I don't think we should think about this as being a digital phenomenon at all. It's just that there's this different way that people want to get something done. And we should take advantage of that to the degree we can and seek to understand it, for sure.
And making movements potentially will influence a lot of the way we go forward and how we bring out brand and develop brand, I suspect.
I think in our way, we believe Smarter Planet and Smarter Cities tapped into that. Right. People want to believe, want to rally around something they believe in, and then you need to feed it and nurture it and not try to control it. And in our case, we have definitely seen that. in ways that were delightful, but also very, very new to us.
Okay. Question in the back.
Is that Jack?
I think still.
Hi.
Oh, there it is. I'd like to go back to the chart you had on data because it's pretty an amazing chart. Can you give us some examples of data that you think might be available to us at some point in the near future that would help us in figuring out engagement strategies?
Yeah, at IBM I have both the CMO and the CCO responsibility. And when I talk to an audience of CMOs, when they look at that chart of data, and then where is it being generated, they all want to get down to one-to-one marketing or segment of one. You hear this, right? And that's what they're all chasing. And so the question they have is, one, am I taking advantage of all the data that exists within my company? So, for example, transaction data. Are you capturing all the data where people are buying from you in different modes? Interaction data. They came into the store, they went to the website. They may not have bought anything, but they spent time looking at certain kinds of content. They opened emails. They downloaded something. These are all available to companies, but they're not fully taking advantage of it. That's just the information that we have in our own systems. The data outside of our enterprise is there too, like on social, but we don't know how to capture it and make sense of it in any given way. This is, by the way, Jack, why I've learned that banking, financial services, and telcos are furthest in use of data to understand individuals than others. Why? They have the data. They know, in the case of telcos, they know how we're using, what we're using, where we are, and banks, they see all the transaction data. Retailers, why are retailers always trying to get us to take out loyalty cards? Because if we walk into one of their stores with cash and buy that bottle of water, all they know is that that bottle of water walked out of that store and that a couple of bucks went in the cash register. If they can get me to use a loyalty card every time I buy something, now they're tracking and collecting all the data. Social. How many of us share on social, or how many people share on social? Oh, graduation just happened, or picking up golf. Or like that. You know how many marketers would love to know that, but they are powerless to know what to do once somebody has shared voluntarily something that could be a trigger moment for a purchase decision. So the data is there. It's either being volunteered or it's available in our transaction systems or through search engines, but we don't know how to take advantage of it down to the individual level at scale. And I won't even get into the use of real-time versus predictive analytics to do something with the data, which is propensity models. You hear this stuff in marketing particularly. Next best action, next best offer, propensity to buy. They're all trying to figure that out too. In other words, can I anticipate what you're going to want based on what they know about us? I don't know why that wouldn't be absolutely applicable to the public relations field.
I think it probably is, but you have to ask the question, and since you're at IBM, I'll ask the difficult follow-up to the question to that. Does it frighten you that you have that data? Does it concern you that marketeers might one day be able to say, that person at that computer, if we put the right message in front of, is suddenly going to reach in their wallet and make a purchase?
Well, I can speak at IBM because this world's, we see the world through data. It's an exciting market opportunity. But set that aside. As a peer and as a consumer, I guess, I'd say that if it's done poorly, I'm being bothered by all of these things, right? If it's done really well, which means it's relevant to me, it'll feel more like a service. So you think the privacy service argument is the way this will be viewed? I do. That in return for sharing with you something about myself, if in return I get something that's more relevant, more customized, more personalized, people will be more open to that. Certainly I know you're talking about this, newer generations, the digital natives and whatnot, they seem to be very, very comfortable in that world of, in return, this is the data sharing strategies I hear, or data attraction strategies you hear some talk about. We have our data collection strategy, but do you have a data attraction strategy, which is, if you'll tell us about this, then we'll make things more relevant, personalized, and customized to you. Very different world.
It's a fascinating world that I think we're entering into, and I think you can all see why Jon is not just a leader in our industry, but a leader at IBM. Jon, thank you for the time today.
Thank you.